Okay, we're live. Can you hear me well? Yeah, let's wait for a couple of minutes. Okay, I think we can start to introduce ourselves, have a short introduction, and slowly start the workshop. Hello, everyone. My name is Alona. I'm a member of dltHub team. DLT is an open source Python library for data loading and data ingestion. So today, Rakesh and Mehdi will show you how to use DLT with the Microsoft Fabric and do some analytics with DuckDB and MotherDuck. So, Rakesh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good one. Okay, good evening, guys, or good afternoon somewhere. So my name is Rakesh. I am a founder and principal consultant at SketchMyView, and I'm also a consulting partner for dltHub. So we do something together, work on DLT with specific things. Past couple of years, I was, CTO for a couple of other companies and startups, but now I decided to get a plunge and start my own. So that's where I do all this data engineering and specifically IoT and analytics stuff in my whole time. So that's me. Over to Maddie.
Yes, I'm Mehdi, also known as Mehdi Online. Been in data engineer space for a bit more than a decade now, and recently joined MotherDuck, which is DuckDB in the cloud, and DuckDB is a in-process database for analytics use case. It's a Swiss Army knife. We're going to talk about it, and yeah, that's roughly about me.
Yeah, thank you, guys. So, Rakesh, I think you can start your workshop part. I will remove myself from the stage,
Cool.
and I think Mehdi as well. And Mehdi, let me know when your part is started.
Okay, cool. So what we are going to do today is that I'm probably going to share something around on Fabric stuff and why dltHub, etc., etc. I think working with a couple of consulting assignments with different customers where we had, explode ADF in Azure and a couple of other platforms, and we thought, okay. I think the thought was, why not if we have something around, Pythonic way of doing things, where we could actually do stuff more than ingestion, and that's where the quest started around DLT and a couple of consulting assignments. We actually started, picking up those stack integrated within ADF and see how it actually goes. And I think the experience was amazing to just begin with. And that's what, the Fabric is a new thing, of course. There are different, the concepts around Fabric and different, thoughts about around the Fabric. But I think, the Fabric it has got a couple of flavors, right? So one flavor is using Spark way. So you can use Spark and all this for big data analytics. But I think, when you come from different experiences, you actually realize that you don't need Spark at all for different ingestions or data transformation at some point of time is if the data set is not big enough to be called a big data set, right? And that's where dltHub comes in from ingestion perspective, which is actually not it actually does ingestion, but at the same time it actually does it a very Pythonic way, and it actually like if you guys have used Spark in the past or something similar, and if you have like let's say you have a nested JSON collections and all these things, then you actually have to write some queries to get those extracted as a part of your data transformation after ingestion. Now, DLT makes this task easy. So once we picked up one of the projects where the JSON was a little bit, quite deep, and DLT actually performed quite well in those situations. And then we started doing something around Fabric. So let me start to share something, share my screen and see. Okay. So I'm sure if you guys can see my screen up, I think that starting with Fabric, because I have got subscription, and I think the best part of Fabric is start with a trial account, and then you can actually move towards that. Let me bring up that little bit of what we plan to do today. So I think the best part would be today is that what we are expecting. I think probably the PPT is visible to you guys. And what we plan to do here is that, building a secure code first data pipelines in Microsoft Fabric. And of course, we are going to use dltHub, but apart from dltHub, the Fabric has got, a couple of flavors, right? So one is Spark, as I was discussing about it. And the other aspect of just using the plain Python, and it is quite powerful, right? Because not every situation and every use cases they actually need Spark, and you are better off just with the Python or Pythonic approach here. And the Microsoft Fabric introduced an option where the developers can use your Python code. It is pretty useful for exploratory purposes and all these things, but I think in my experience, it actually goes beyond exploration purposes. Number one, apart from exploration, it actually comes with different features within Microsoft ecosystem. One, how do you secure your data? Of course, if you are using Pythonic way, then you use environment variables and all these things and different other ways to store all those secrets. Of course, if you want to, you can use different other key vault mechanism or vault mechanism, but setting up those things, etc., is quite complex. Now, I work on Microsoft technologies and AWS day in day out in a couple of other open source projects, and in my experience, when you have managed services, then it actually makes your life a little bit easier. And easier in the sense that you have your orchestrator tool at your disposal, and then you have different other tools like Key Vault. How do I store my secrets, and where do I store it? Now, if I want to define some environment, how do I define it? Where do I define it? So it actually makes your life easy. And also Microsoft and Azure ecosystem, they have got different other services which are integrated within Fabric ecosystem. So that actually makes your life a little bit more easy. Okay. So that's I'm just going to run through what we plan to take up in a workshop today, and what we plan to do further on. Of course, Mehdi will be joining me on the DuckDB and MotherDuck side, how Fabric and MotherDuck and DuckDB complement each other, and we'll see it further with some demos, etc. as well. I think I have already explained that, and I think the question is why DLT? Yeah, DLT. I think if you have been in the data ecosystem just for a long time, I mean, keeping aside the other the moving parts, the data engineers day in day out, they do three primary stuffs, right? So one is ingesting that data, and then transforming that data Of course, when you are transforming that data, then you write some SQL queries, yeah, right? You just define some source or sources, and you have some destination or destinations where you want to keep that data, right? So data engineers primarily deal with all those things. Now, I'm not getting into the cataloging stuff and all this stuff, though I plan to touch a bit upon how it can be used within that ecosystem itself, and which is pretty useful. Okay, but here what we do with the DLT is the declarative data pipelines, because it is just Python, so it is just declarative data pipeline. You just define a blueprint, etc., etc. So you actually do things in a very declarative way. Where ADF within Azure ecosystem, it doesn't come. Of course, it actually signs with, if you have very plain and simple use cases, it is pretty useful. But if you want to go beyond declarative uses, then you just need some other tool which it can be used within that ecosystem itself. Schema management. I think I'm not sure how many guys have you gone through the DLT thing, but I think schema management is one of the aspects which every data engineer they go through in their lifetime, right? So how do you manage your schema for and schema is for different purposes and different use cases. But schema evolution and schema management is what DLT supports out of the box, which I liked quite interestingly when I started working with a POC and exploring how DLT fits within that particular use case. Now, data load automation. Now, of course, when you are writing a vanilla Python code, you can do X, Y, Z stuff. Okay, I mean, just you can achieve anything you would like, but of course, error-prone, time-consuming. Now the DLT comes, and built with data load automation stuff. It means if we are looking to move data from point A, and point A in this case is one source system to another destination system, and it actually signs a lot, right? A couple of use cases, like just moving data from CSV to DuckDB or MotherDuck, or from PostgreSQL or SQL Server, or in fact in Databricks, etc. You can move data from CSV or different other data sources to Databricks completely. So that actually comes out of the box, right? And data quality and observability. Again, the data quality is inbuilt within DLT ecosystem, and observability also. It means in ADF and in any data engineering aspects, when you start to build a data platform, you think about a couple of other stuffs also, right? It's not about how you are writing your daily data engineering steps, but also how you are going to observe those in case of problems. So how you want to have those integrated within that particular pipelines, etc. Now the DLT comes with full observability. It means it actually watches and monitors every metrics goes through that particular DLT pipeline. I'm actually using the term pipeline just so all the data engineers can relate to it, or the audiences and the tuning data engineers. So it actually monitors every pipeline it actually goes through, and it is an add-on advantage because you don't have to write a single code to do that, because the DLT does it for you out of the box. Now, modularity and reusability. Of course, DLT comes with another use cases where, from the Pythonic way, the modularity and reusability is the primary focus. I think the data engineers who come from SQL background, or specifically SQL script backgrounds, they are not quite familiar with reusability stuff. But if you come from software engineering background, or if you are slowly moving into software engineering principles, then you realize how reusability and modularity, and you cherish those things, because it means you write once and you can use that particular bit of things everywhere. And our integration with modern workflow, it means DLT is a pure Pythonic way. It means you are free to bring that into CI/CD aspects, and you can integrate with any orchestrator too. It is not dependent on like Airflow or Azure Data Factory or something. it can be integrated with any other the workflows, which is quite useful if you are keen to move from platform A to platform B. It actually gives you a very neutral aspect, and that is of course another, again, I wouldn't say out of the box, because since it can be integrated with any other platform and tools, it is quite useful. Okay, so again, the topic of the day: why DLT with Fabric and beyond. Again, when you are developing, any platform, whether a platform or any data engineering platform, you get to choose your tools, and tools in the mean how you want to ingest your data, how you want to orchestrate it, how you're going to transform it, how you are going to secure your and CI/CD pipelines and data transformation tools and all these things. Now, the Fabric comes with all these things. Of course, before Fabric, the guys who have come through, Synapse, Microsoft Synapse or Databricks, the Fabric, they try to build a unified data analytics platform where you come here and you actually build your own. At the same time, I think it's my observation when starting with Fabric, a couple of months ago. It's actually a feature where you can use Spark actually. So you don't have to use PySpark or Scala or something, but you can use only Python to build your ingestion pipeline. If you are using dbt for data transformation, then of course it can be used within the Fabric environment. Now, the Fabric comes with DuckDB pre-installed. It means you don't have to pip install DuckDB, etc. And it actually comes with polars and all these data science tools, and it is just completely out of the box. It means you have given a predefined line, start exploring your data. You don't have to be writing the productionized code, but you can start actually exploring from data exploration perspective. But in the what you want to do is that you start exploring this information or your data, and then you start to build the productionized code. But it actually comes with inbuilt DuckDB, the MotherDuck DBT. DLT is missing at the point, and hopefully the Microsoft recognizes at some point of time. But of course, since it is completely a Python notebook and it actually uses Python kernel, so it means you can actually use pip install commands to install any libraries there, right? And then you can use data engine AI in cross-cloud platforms, and of course you can use you can build a true data platform here. The workshop blueprint, what's going to happen is that we are going to use a Northwind datasets. That's a complete REST API. I have written a couple of articles on it, but this is going to be kinds of hands-on session what we do here. And what we want to do here is that using DLT to ingesting all this data. And of course, we would be saving those information. I'm not going to cover all those Microsoft Fabric fundamentals, but of course, I'm going to go and touch a bit of what is OneLake, etc. here. And then pipelines, because of course you don't have to choose any ingestion or orchestration things here, because that's actually comes in built with MS Fabric. And then how do you want to secure your credentials? So of course we are going to use DuckDB to have those JSON-L file ingested using dltHub to Delta Lake. And Delta Lake in this case is OneLake in this case. A couple of more structures here, but we'll touch through all those things. And then we use dbt to transform this data, and then of course we can have build analytics and all these things. Now, since we can use MotherDuck here, it means we can use if you have MotherDuck subscription and you have credentials, then it becomes important where do you store those credentials, right? And how to store those credentials pretty securely. And that's what we are going to discuss here as well, to store those information securely and then have those, information sent to MotherDuck for further analytics then. Yeah, and then I think I'll probably touch upon, because of course the purview is being used around as a data platform. So how do you detect that? Because the idea of using MS Fabric and one stack here is that you can actually use and have a unified way to manage everything. Okay, and of course, if you don't want to use one tool, that's completely fine. There are other tools available within Microsoft ecosystem where you can actually use those tools for your disposal. Now, of course, Fabric and everything, you can build your infrastructure through Terraform here, or if you want to choose something else, like ARM templates or something else, then you can free to choose. But the Terraform is known everywhere at the minute. So yeah, you can, because the Fabric is also integrated with Terraform plugins. So of course, you can use Terraform to build all those infrastructures, deploy in Fabric workspace, and then of course, then you can use it for subsequent uses then. Okay, so coming back to Fabric again, if you guys don't have any subscription, but you don't have to worry about that. Just use that app fabric.microsoft.com. I'm going to probably paste that here so people, if you don't have any access to it, you can use it. And that's a link you can use to register. The only prerequisite is it actually asks you to use your business email. Unfortunately, it doesn't accept your personal emails. So you have to use your business email, and it actually gives you a 60 days trial, which is sufficient enough to try Fabric. And you can try things if you want to. Okay. So if you guys have, a subscription already or a trial subscription, you can, just use that. But just use that, link to register and have a trial for 60 days. In my case, I think the Microsoft was quite generous me to extending a couple of more trial licenses, which I'm utilizing it. Probably I'm just early mover to the Fabric. That's why probably. Okay. Okay, so that's the link I have already shared, so that's completely fine. I think I just want to pause for a second and probably, Betty, if you can tell me if I'm audible correctly so far and screen's visible, that would help a bit.
Yes, but I think, are you sharing other screen? Because we're only seeing the Fabric one.
Okay, that's interesting. Let me share a screen. Yeah, share a screen. Windows, entire screen. Oh, okay. So I think I missed a bit of thing then. Okay, now I think you guys can see that. And I'm not sure how it works. Yeah. Is that visible now?
Yeah, now we see a slide. We haven't seen any of the slides.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay, so I just missed it. Sorry, my bad. So little bit of rundown here. So that's a workshop first PPT page I mentioned here. This is what we are going to build today, DuckDB and MotherDuck and everything here. And then I went around why DLT. So declarative data pipeline, schema management, data quality, modularity, integration with modern workflows. And then why DLT with Fabric and beyond. Happy to share this PPT at the end of the session today. And then that's what we are going to have this workshop. So that's what I was discussing about. This is the full blueprint, what we are going to do today. We'll have quizzes, and of course, at the end of the session, you'll have that certifications and quizzes at the end of this workshop or during the workshop. Apologies, so I think I did only show one screen, but yeah, I think I was talking about this app Fabric Microsoft.com where you can actually register here. And I've sent this particular link to the chat. So the only prerequisite is this: you just come to it and you don't enter your personal emails because the personal emails are not allowed here. So use your business email to get yourself registered and you get a 60 days trial license. And you might have to use Key Vault, because the Key Vault is not part of the Fabric ecosystem. Here it is just a workspace like Databricks and all that stuff. So you go to Azure portal and you can use your Azure specific things like Key Vault or blob storage or something if you want to use. But we are here, we are not going to use the blob storage here. We are going to use one lake, which is kind of AWS Gen 2, which is kind of data lake within Microsoft ecosystem here. Okay, thanks for reminding, Danny. Sorry, my bad. Forgot it. Okay, so I think I have covered everything. Now, I would probably encourage guys to go and register yourself to this particular link and see if you can register and get 60 days of trial license of Fabric. And then you can try that stuff and just during the workshop or after the workshop, how you're comfortable, you can do it. Okay, coming back to Fabric, I said I'm not going to cover everything around Fabric. Once you get the license, you can explore yourself and see what it has to offer. But I'm going to touch why Fabric, etc., etc. And Fabric is, they claim to be a unified, data analytics workspace. It means the data engineers, data science guys, or anyone related to analytics, they can just stick to this workspace. They can have different workspaces for different teams. So workspace is what is the heart of Fabric. So once you have your account created, and you see here trial 29 days left, so you will probably see 60 days left at the end of your registration. Okay, so once you come to Fabric, you come with My Workspace. And I wouldn't encourage you to work within that workspace because the CI/CD pipelines and automation will not work, and they don't use My Workspace. So what you have to do is that you have to create a new workspace here, and then you create your own new workspace, and then all the CI/CD pipelines and automation will actually start working for yourself. So just for information, if you get into that your CI/CD pipelines are not working, and of course you are using My Workspace, if you come to your created workspace, then your CI/CD pipelines will be okay. You can map to, you will have a couple of options. I'm not going to go into how do you configure those settings and everything, but you have two ways at the minute to configure your workspace and repository. One, as a DevOps, you can configure it, and the second is GitHub. And you can have the GitHubs and CI/CD automation in place. If you want to use, you can use these deployment pipelines to create your CI/CD, but I would encourage you to have GitHub Actions and all these things for proper CI/CD pipelines. Now, coming back to today's topic, Microsoft Fabric. So that's the workspace I have chosen for this workshop and a couple of demo I've been doing. And what I'm going to do is that this is what we are going to do today in this workshop. As I was suggesting here, what we want to do is that we want to have this Northwind REST API ingested, and we'll show you how and where we want to store that. Okay, so why Fabric? Because I don't have to find any tool. Of course, Daxters and all Airflow and all these tools are great. And of course, when I was discussing about, because this is workflow independent DLT stuff, it means the DLT can be used with all other orchestration tools, which is massive. So if you want to switch to different orchestration or ingestion tool, that's completely okay. You can switch your orchestration, but if you have same Python code, that's completely fine. It will work across. That shouldn't be a problem. Now the first step, if you see from ingestion perspective and considering the kind of audiences here, what we have here is that plain ingest not fill data. Now the guys who have come from Azure itself and other guys who just don't use Azure or AWS or something, or they use some open source tool, Airflow, Dexter, or something else, or the cloud version of those. The first thing you want to be choosing that what's the REST API URL, right? And the URL in this case is this. So that's the URL. And within the Fabric environment, because it actually uses a pipeline concepts. So it means here's a notebook, and what this notebook is all about. Let me open this notebook and see just what it does. What it does from using that dltHub code is just move this data from point A to point B. So data load. So I want to load my data from point A to point B. Point A in this case is Northwind REST APIs, and point B in my case is OneLake. OneLake is the default data lake within Fabric workspace here. And in the hindsight, I think the guys who have come from Azure background, they would know that this is just ADLS Gen 2 in the background. It is OneLake, but in the background it is just ADLS Gen 2. But let's make it simple and say data lake. I want to save those ingested data in the data lake. Now I have to as I was saying before, DLT is not part of pre-packaged Python libraries, so we'll have to install that. But before that, let's understand what is this here, because this is just notebook environment. So if you want to do anything here, just Python scripting, you can actually do it. And this is pretty powerful, right? We actually all do everywhere, we write some scripts and it does something. Now, once you come to Fabric environment, it actually gives you a couple of options. The PySpark, Spark SQL, Spark R, which we are not focusing today. But Fabric comes with a nice Python, the Pythonic way of doing things. And another is DSQL, but our focus today is Python only. Now, it is pretty powerful. If you can imagine, and I was saying, I have done numerous consulting assignments in my career. And sometimes you actually you just scratching your head and saying, okay, this is not big data set. So if I'm not using Spark, what else I can use? And of course, you can use other things. But I think things started to change after DuckDB came into the picture. Yeah. So the DuckDB, the fundamental was clearly pretty plain and simple. Write some SQL code, connect to point A. Point A in this case is one data source. Do some analytics on it, and if you want to move to somewhere else, you can actually move, right? So it actually makes your analytics quite easy for a couple of terabytes. The gigabytes of data. I haven't tested with terabytes, so I just can't confirm it. But of course, all the data sets I have worked in my whole career, probably one or two, they would have actually needed, I would actually classify them as a big data, right? And then I would probably need Spark or something else to handle those big data. But apart from that, I think a gap I actually found, and DuckDB wasn't there at all in those cases there. I was using something else, but I think DuckDB changed a little bit of more, picture here. And that's why the Fabric is quite fascinating in this case, that either you can use Spark or you can use Python environment to build your data analytics platform, which is quite useful here. So that's what I'm using here in this minute, is that I'm using plain Python background, plain Python environment, nothing else. And this Python environment comes with pre-built libraries. DuckDB is one of them, then Polars and a couple of others. Panda already there, NumPy already there, but massive other libraries are there. So it actually makes your life easy. They come in built. Now, if you see, this Python environment is pretty, capable of doing things. It comes with 16 gig. In my current trial capacity, it actually comes with 16 gig of RAM, which is quite good. It actually then depends on your fabric capacity. So if you have more powerful fabric capacity, then you can use different other, configuration and specs within fabric environment. But we are going to use Python in this case. And that's what we are going to use. It has got different other options. I'll let you guys explore it. But what we are doing here is that first stage, we are just installing DLT. And now our ask is, since we are moving data from REST API to data lake, which is a file system, a blob storage. So I need to use that DLT file system to be able to move data from a REST API to file system. Now DLT is expanding its source and destination plugins, and they are coming with a lot of different systems where you can move data to different destinations, or you can use different sources. Now, if you use the file system, then of course you can use Azure Blob Storage or AWS S3 you can use, or GCP file storage you can actually use just by using this library. Okay, so that's only two pieces required to configure is Enlighter, just for my more commenting thing. How the system or ingestion is progressing here. Now, the guys who have come from different backgrounds, not using Azure or something else. Now, if you see, I am using API URL, but where this API URL is coming from, it should come from somewhere, right? Now, when you integrate or build a data analytics system, you have a couple of environments, right? So let's say we have a dev environment where devs can, use one REST API, which is, kind of staging or dev environment that they can use to build that data analytics platform. And then once you move across different environments, then you need to configure different URLs or different REST API URLs for different environments. And that is, a task in itself. So how do you pass those, parameters? And that's where, the fabric, of course, comes with the pipeline concept, where you would actually pass those from pipelines. And of course, when you are building your CI/CD pipelines, those parameters gets passed here, and it will be picked environment specific REST API URL. And then here in this here, you have one more thing I would want to clarify. If you see, of course, if you guys have used, then these are individual cells. This is just Jupyter files, just individual cells. But if you see here, this is parameters here. So it means I am telling in actually pipelines and notebook here that this is going to be a runtime parameter here, which will come from somewhere. In this case, it is coming from a pipeline, but it can come from anywhere. Okay, so that's why I'm saying this is a parameter. You will see option here, and then you have this option here. That's I want to have this parameter cell. So once you toggle it, then of course you can turn it off. Okay. But now since I want it, I'll say, okay, and I know now I want this variable as a parameter. It can be passed from anywhere else. And that's why you see this as parameter. And then you have some code using DLT. Of course, you actually import necessary libraries and using those libraries. Now, the best thing of DLT, as I was saying before, is that declarative. Okay, and that actually makes life of a data engineer like a poetry, right? You define your own steps, how you want to do it, and DLT doesn't dictate things for you. Okay, so it is a very declarative thing. So you declare all these things, how you want to configure it. Of course, if you say this, how you're passing these parameters, this is very Python specific things. You pass parameters and you come here, resources, and if you see, you can configure multiple resources here. There are different other ways to minimize this or create a reusable code, but this actually works for the time being. And here you configure all those REST API endpoints, but the URL is completely same, right? So this is same. This is different other REST. They are different REST API endpoints where I'm ingesting data. So it means I'm not creating a separate pipelines for different endpoints, and that's a beauty. Within one single block, I'm actually defining all those REST API endpoints, and DLT is going to parallelize those and bring those data to my OneLake. Okay. Then, of course, I'm just having those data stored here. Now, destination, since I'm using OneLake, which is a data lake file-based blob storage system, so that's why I'm importing this. And what it is doing in a nutshell is that I'm saying Northfield, Northwind, and this is my bucket URL, right? In Fabric, how do you get this? So within Fabric, there are two concepts: one, lakehouse, and second, warehouse. Lakehouse, simple, the concept of tables and files. Okay, so ultimately, files, it means you can store any files here. It doesn't have to be CSV. It doesn't have to be JSON. It doesn't have to be any specific file format. But you can store any files here. So that's a point of having this data lake. I can dump any files here, which is file section here. And I'm saying bucket URL is this. And if you want to have any bucket URL, you actually go to anything here and you just copy this file API path. Now, since you are operating within Fabric environment, so you have credentials, or if you are running through service principal, it will have credentials to save or write into that particular path. But Fabric has got a feature called copy ABFS path. So either it can be OneLake ABFS path. So ABFS path, for those who don't know, is that this is data lake ADLS Gen 2 in Azure. So it is called ABFS path. So either you can use OneLake here, or you can use your previous data lake in Azure itself. Then. Now, another cool feature here is that export schema path and import schema path, which is, if you have been developing data engineering stuff, building data platform, then you would know that I would actually want to know the schema of that particular data I'm actually ingesting, right? Now, ADF, which is integrated with Azure Data Factory, it doesn't have much capability around managing that schema. Now, DLT gives you those out of the box. It means first time what you can do is that you can import schema as it is, or next time once you have run your ingestion pipelines, then you run your schema, then you change your schema here. I would encourage you to install OneLake, and if you use OneLake here, it means it is just in a folder on my computer, so think about OneDrive. I'm using Fabric Dev workspace here, and I'm using this lakehouse. If you see files and metadata, import, and I'm using this Northwind schema. And this is Northwind schema. It's simple, plain, the YAML. I have configured all the data type and everything. So if I want to make suitable changes to the data types, I can do it, and DLT would actually respect that. Right. So once it moves data from point A to point B, then of course it will respect that particular schema. And then once you export that schema, it will get that schema out from that itself. So just for little knowledge that if you haven't explored import and export schema, worth using. and not many tools actually allow those kind of things. I'm not talking about Databricks, I'm not talking about Spark and all these things, but I think if you consider about, if you have to develop those in a very Python specific way, you take a lot of time to build those things, but that comes out of the box with DLT. And what I'm doing here is that, moving the data from REST API to one lake here. And that's the first part of it. Okay, and why Fabric? Because the problem, within data engineering environment is not, the developing is one aspect, but how you are going to monitor it, how you are going to troubleshoot it, investigate it where the problem is, right? So now once you run any pipeline, so like, last I executed here, it actually gives you a lot of clue. So once you get into it, and if I want to know about what actually happened with that, I want to know the set of steps. And this is integrated within Azure and Fabric environment itself, and it's not specific to Azure. Okay, so this actually gives you how my ingestion went, right? And it actually gives you things for investigation purposes, things for if you are looking at how do I optimize it. So if you see content NW API URL and it passes this value, and okay, this is installing DLT, and then this is installing other libraries here, and of course so once you declare, because it was parameter and it came from that pipeline itself, it swapped with that passed on parameter here. So that's why you see this is a REST API URL. And that's the beauty of having that integrated within Fabric environment, that you have control to pass those dynamic parameters, and it actually adds a lot of value here. And you are not looking at outside tool, etc., etc. It is a part of Fabric ecosystem itself. Okay, and then it runs through all this code and everything, and then you can have all those metrics and logs, everything, and that is for the advantage. Since I'm using this enrichment things, it is giving me how the ingestion process is going on, etc., and it actually gives you all other details there, which is pretty useful. Let's say the pipeline failed and if we are looking to troubleshoot it, then it actually gives you more than one investigation point. You can actually go into the notepad, this particular notebook, and see what went wrong, what actually parameters it actually. So like I can see here, this is my REST API endpoint. Why did you might find that okay during your investigation that okay that REST API endpoint was wrong. That's why the data is coming wrong. So these kind of things add more values here. Okay, so I am going to close this. A little bit of feature around Fabric and integration, how you can troubleshoot. Now DLT also comes with its own logging mechanism. So if you want to have those all logs integrated, etc., then yes, you can have those integrated within. I would encourage you to go through the DLT documentation and see how you can integrate. And those logs are completely out of the box. You don't have to write. Of course, you will actually write what you want to extract, but DLT is, holding those informations. And if you want to pass that information to one lake, or if you want to pass this information to DuckDB or MotherDuck, which you can use to build pretty useful analytics, log analytics to read through your logs. It is pretty useful case using MotherDuck or DuckDB then, and it can be used. Now, as I was explaining here, the Lakehouse comes with two flavors: files as I explained, you can dump all the files here. It can be CSV, it can be JSON, it can something else. And then you can transform those files and then have you done. Now, the other things, tables, and tables are simply delta tables. The guys who are coming from SQL background or any other users, they'll see completely, schema and everything, how a delta lake would provide. So this is a table, but it actually, so in the background, this is a delta table. So it has got all the logs and all this information. So let's say if we were to use this one lake, which I would encourage you guys to go through and find that, lakehouse tables, and they are basically delta files. So they are all Parquet, delta logs and everything. So it actually captures all these logging information, and delta has got all these. In the background, they're all delta tables. Okay, but it actually gives you a feature that, okay, you are using a table. It actually gives you all those schemas and everything you can view. If you want to query, you can still query it. You can say load data, and you can use pandas, you can use DuckDB, you can use different other ways to identify it, which is massive. Now the next step, so once we have ingested data, the other step was, now DLT is capable of storing or ingesting that data and save in Delta Lake. Now, just for this workshop session, what I want to emphasize here is that I want to run past what are other capabilities of Fabric also at the same time. Okay. So if you see this diagram here, you see we have ingested this data in a JSON NL format. Okay. And what does that mean? It means once we have ingested this data, sorry, here, since we have defined it, and if you see, they're all plain JSON-L files. Let me go back to one lake again. Lakehouse finds not branch categories, and these categories are JSON-L files. The other thing, the beautiful thing with DLT is that once you ingest file, it actually compresses by default, which is good, right? When you so when it starts to compress that data file, it means you have less to process afterward, but it can be overridden. If you want that, no, I don't want to compress that file, you can still pass those parameters and you can not compress it. But default in DLT is compression. We just click compresses with GG and just the by default is just on L here. But you can have your files, in CSV, in different other Parquet or something, and that's in compressed format here. Okay. And that's where we are. So you have either you can go through your data through this UI, or you can use one lake to go through all those files. And up to you. But actually, Fabric gives you one lake app where you can use to connect, and then you can see files around if you have got permission to see. Now, the next step I wanted to do is that let's say we have the JSON-L files. Now, how do you compress? Now those files are compressed file. How do you want to have that data in Delta table, right? And as I was explaining, when you use Microsoft uh, Fabric, it actually gives you other options to pass your data as, right? So in this case, where is this? Yeah. So what is this here then? Here, what it is doing is, I don't want to see that. I wanted to show that how do you pass those parameters. The guys, if you know Azure and Azure Data Factory, then you know what it has to offer. It's like I need to go back. Okay, so if you see the couple of tabs opens here, one is parameters, so you can pass those, and I'm using those to pass those parameters. So you can define your own parameter. It doesn't have to be fabric specific. So what I'm seeing here is NW API parameter, and then then how I'm using is that base parameter NW API, and then I'm using this parameters. There are a couple of syntaxes in Fabric from pipeline perspective how you want to pass this parameter. So if you have, then of course you can pass those all parameters here then. Okay, so you have parameters, you have variables here, you have settings you can do, concurrency you can define here. Now the Microsoft Fabric the pipeline, it actually comes with parallelism also, so you can control how you want to parallelize your information. dltHub is only the Python script, but how do you want to parallelize it? And you can control everything here. Now the next step is how you want to move that JSON-L file to Delta. And what's been done here is that plain DuckDB program, nothing else. And it is so powerful using that Python. I'm not getting into Spark or anything else. I'm just using, you can use different flavors of DuckDB. So you can use your SQL queries, or you can use, the functions here. What I have done here is that get me the table name, get me a Fabric workspace name. I'm using DuckDB, so I'm not installing DuckDB here because that actually comes pre-installed. Okay, and what I'm using is that I'm using DuckDB to have that whole branch and every folder read. Compression, I'm actually saying compression gzip, so DuckDB knows that the compression is gzip, and it will then while actually writing to Delta, it will then apply suitable the mechanism to write to Delta tables then. And what it is exactly doing is that once it has got it, then write Delta, which is here is a polar specific syntax. But my point was how you can mix and match within this Python environment itself. So if you know DuckDB, so you can use DuckDB, and then if you know polars, then of course you can use polars to write the data to the Delta table then, which is pretty powerful. So I'm not using any Spark, I'm not using anything else. I'm using what I know at the minute. So if I know DuckDB or if I know polars, I can use that here then. And DuckDB is pretty powerful here. So I think just before I move on to different other things, I'll probably I would like to have that on DuckDB and MotherDuck, and how we can explore that specific information from DuckDB and the MotherDB, and read those analytics and build those analytics. I might probably call Mehdi to come here and just talk about the DuckDB. Mehdi, over to you a bit.
Yes, let me just get ready. I'm gonna share the slide. So, well, how much time do we actually have for compared to the total workshop?
Yeah, I've been probably 10-15 minutes, okay, or 20 minutes if you want to. That's completely fine.
All right. So I'll do a quick refresh on what MotherDuck is. I just need to add my screen. If Elena can add my screen, that's perfect. It is not this one, actually. Sorry. One sec. Let's do it again. Entire screen. There you go. So the basically updates. I'm gonna do a quick refresh on what is MotherDuck, and sorry, in the first DuckDB for people that are not aware of DuckDB, and then we're gonna talk about MotherDuck. Quickly, DuckDB has been created in at CWI. It's in Amsterdam. It's an open source project, so created by Mark and Hannes that you see on the picture. And in short, it's an analytical database. It's run in process. It's MT license. There is multiple client language, and we've passed 10 million downloads per month on Python client only. So it's pretty popular these days. The thing to grasp on what DuckDB is compared to other databases that you may know for analytics is that you have really this dimension of client server typically. So all the analytics database, would it be BigQuery, Snowflake, or ClickHouse, works on a client server. You have a client that sends, text SQL to the server to execute and compute your queries. And you have a transactional database like Postgres or SQLite that are more, the backbone of your operational application, because they have different requirements, and analytical specifically are designed for group by some analytics queries. So DuckDB is really a new kind of database as you see it on the picture, meaning that we often talk the SQLite for analytics because it can run in process. That means that you don't need any server side. If you install through Python, you just pip install DuckDB, and it's going to run within the same process of your Python application. There is nothing else to add, and you can start, crunching data. There is multiple clients, as I explained. DuckDB. There is the CLI, the Node.js package, the Python package. The Python package and the CLI is the most common interface, but there is people using it in Java and so on. It's really a Swiss Army knife, so you can read from any type of file, CSV, JSON, Parquet, Iceberg. It has its own data file format called DuckDB. It's a one file that contains all tables and metadata. So it's an internal file format. So you can load any CSV, JSON, and Parquet into a single DuckDB database file. It's also operated really well with polars and pandas thanks to Arrow. So you can do query on Panda data frame, polars data frame with zero copy operation. Again, other source, you can directly query from Postgres table, MySQL table. You can read and write from S3, Google Cloud Storage, or Azure. So really a Swiss Army knife. In Python, that looks like this. You do a pip install DuckDB, you create a connection, and you can start, inserting data and computing data. So I said, there is a DuckDB storage, a one file format for all your tables and metadata. There is a mechanism of extension. Most of the extensions are installed by default for you, but the good thing to know is that there is also community extension. So for example, you have Google Sheet extension, so you can read directly from a Google Sheet. So you can execute SQL, because DuckDB is really firstly SQL, against a Google Sheet and write it back. There is multiple other community extension. And with DBT, so the data processing framework, it works also really nice. I have a small demo here. I think it fits really well the workshop here. So we're gonna run a bit around that. But first, so let's jump. We spent 4 minutes about wrap about what is DuckDB. Now let's go on MotherDuck. So the legacy data cloud data warehouse, basically you have user fighting among the same resource basically, and the problem with that is that today we have designed, as Rakesh said, our machine gets much bigger in terms of performance, and our data usage has been smaller, or rather, it's more than the compute capacity of our single laptop has been, outgrowing our needs for at least, fresh data, daily size data. Everything can mostly fit into a machine. And if you look at actually the AWS, performance that you can get up to 24 terabytes of RAM nowadays on a single machine. So scale up is actually easier than scale out, where you have multiple small machine, community machine. Here you can just level up on a single machine. And with DuckDB running, in process, that's really interesting to avoid all the computer I/O network. So MotherDuck, in short, it's DuckDB in the cloud. It's a distributed DuckDB in the cloud, and how it works is, as we said, we scale up your resource. So if you have multiple users here that need to process or access data, they're gonna have a dedicated what we call duck links. So you see, user A have specific needs, so they don't fight those users among the same resource on the data warehouse. They have each one as their own duck link depending on their needs. Of course, there is much more to that to MotherDuck. The first thing is that you have the scalability in the cloud in serverless mode. You can manage data access, so you can have a shared database. You can handle your AWS, Google Cloud, Azure secret safely. So if you want to query, for example, S3 from the cloud and benefit from the network cloud, that's what MotherDuck also is really useful. And there is also this notion of a dual execution query engine. So in a sense, you have the same DuckDB working locally on the cloud, and it's really smooth the whole development experience workflow that I'm going to illustrate quickly in the demo. Just quickly, MotherDuck has tons of integration with existing BI tool. We just released the Tableau Cloud support, because I know that this workshop also highlights Tableau integration. And to connect to DuckDB is really just an attach command, which is specific a command to DuckDB. It's like, instead of attaching a local DuckDB, I'm attaching to MotherDuck, and that's it. So this is just me running the DuckDB CLI, but that can be in any client, could be Python, Java, and whatsoever. So anywhere you can run DuckDB, you can run MotherDuck. And that basically, when I'm doing this attach, then all my queries after is going to run. I can decide to run them on the cloud or run them locally. You're going to get the things a bit more quickly with the demo. We have an UI which is super nice for ad hoc analysis or exploratory. It's also available in DuckDB locally, so you can either connect it directly to motherduck.com and using the UI, or just locally to DuckDB UI. This is a double side. All right, let's go to the demo with dbt. So dbt is just a client that run SQL. And the thing with the classic setup of dbt is that you're always relying on a cloud data warehouse. And cloud data warehouse are great for scaling and sharing data among other users. But the problem is the development experience, right? It's like dbt doesn't have an execution engine. dbt just sends SQL to the target cloud data warehouse. And with DuckDB, if you remember what I said earlier in the wrap-up, it's an in-process database. And I said that it can run into the same process if you're using a Python application. So dbt is a Python application. And so that means that it can run into the same process of dbt and directly compute and execute locally. And so that's great for development experience, because then instead of always relying to the cloud data warehouse, even for development purpose, CI pipeline for testing, you just have a clear local development where you use dbt locally. And then when you need to scale and you need to schedule your job, you can leverage MotherDuck, where it's DuckDB in the cloud. And so this is the demo. The demo is available. I'm going to share it before I forget in the chat right here. So the I'll share. I cannot seems to share it, but I'll share it after, I guess, in the description. I don't know why it's not sharing in the chat. But so if you go on GitHub MotherDuck example, the example I'm going to run is right there. So let's go for it. We have I'm going to do just 2 or 3 minutes on this one. So it's a classic DBT repo. And for those aware, basically, I have an adapter for DuckDB. And you see that if I want to run dev basically locally, it's going to write a DuckDB file as a reminder. It's a one file that contains all tables and metadata. And if I want to basically process it remotely, and so using the cloud compute, I'm going to do a path with the MD. And this is my database on the cloud. The only thing I need is a MotherDuck token. You can get this from MotherDuck, and it's passed as an environment variable, right? So you can do export MotherDuck token, yada, and that's the only thing you need to authenticate, right? So if I launched DuckDB CLI just to show you, and I do show databases, I'm not going to have anything. It's my in-process DuckDB local. But if I do an attach MD, which DBT is going to do.
Can you please zoom in your
screen?
Yeah. Thank you.
There you go. Sorry about that. So if I do an attach MD, for example, you see now if I do again the show database, you're going to see all the cloud database. And so if I'm running a single query from one of those, it's going to be using the cloud compute. All right. So this is a bit the dual execution where I can either run stuff locally or run in the cloud. And the only thing I need to authenticate or switch is the attach command. So that's what is happening in the profile here. There is the MD to say when you're running production, you're running on MotherDuck. So yeah, let's just do a DBT run first locally. So what it's doing here is that I'm actually querying directly public Parquet file, which is Hacker News data from a year. So it's about 800 megabytes, so almost 1 gigabyte of data. And I'm doing multiple models on data from Hacker News. So I'm computing the number of top domains that's been shared, the top stories, and the number of times people have been mentioning, this past year, DuckDB. So you see, I've done everything in 21 seconds. And now I have local DuckDB. So you see, it's right there, which is about 1.8 megas. So that's the end results of the data sets. And I can expand it. So let's actually use a local DuckDB with the UI to inspect the data. So that's the local UI I can use. And so you see, I have my table that has been created, and so I can start query it. And we also release Instant SQL, which basically Instant SQL enable you to have the cache of the data directly kind of in the UI. So I can do cool stuff like select, I think it's title, and you see column are basically showing as we go, okay? And so, for example, if I do where title, like, let's say, I don't know, Apple. So what's been mentioning Apple? There is no story like that that's contained that. But I think. Oh yeah, of course. That's the top story. So that's why there is only a few data set here. But so just with Instant SQL, you have instant feedback on everything you want to do. So for example, if I do NB comments and I divide it by 10, you see I have directly the result and I can inspect it. So to see the division, this is 2000 divided by 10. So that's the cool thing about the IDE. And if I sign up to MotherDuck, so I have already authenticated, on MotherDuck once. Now I'm on the cloud and I can see all my notebook and all my database cloud, which is over here. So that's for local usage. Now, if I want to run, let's do. I think I have this one here. So what I'm doing now is just running the same dbt process, but now to MotherDuck. Okay, so I'm not using the local DuckDB instance, but the DuckDB cloud. And you see it's much faster, of course, because then I'm using the cloud compute, right? So 7 seconds. And now if I go to my DuckDB UI, I have closed the DuckDB UI, but I can go to motherduck.com and go to Hacker News Stats, and I have my table, which is right there. Yeah, that's basically it. How easy it is to go from local to cloud, and scaling your data from a local DuckDB to MotherDuck using dbt. That will be it for me. And I'm 16 minutes, so 1 minute above.
That's good, impressive. Cool. I'll take it back here then. Okay. Okay, now coming back. Yeah, okay, Lena, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So workshop is over, right?
No, I have a couple of more things to run past. And then
You want to share something, or
yeah, I think I've already said it. I think I've already said it.
Share. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I think I'll probably go back to what actually Mehdi was discussing about, the secrets, the MotherDuck token, and all these things. And I want to take a little bit of time explaining that, how you can integrate those credentials in a very secure way within Fabric and Azure environment itself, right? So once you subscribe or register to this Fabric stuff, using same credentials, you can actually use Azure portal. So that's a portal. I can use VS Code to access everything, all the resources. The point is, here I have created a resource, a Key Vault resource in Azure, and I'm using and having all the secrets here. So let's see, the MD token is a MotherDuck token here. It means when I'm running my program, then I'm not storing anywhere in an environment variable or hard-coded or any pipeline, etc., etc. Now, if you think from CI/CD perspective, the CI/CD will have different tokens for different environments. It means if you have this secret name generic or unique, let's say MD token here, then MD token will be created across the environments. And then it can be accessed in your Python notebooks where you want it to be. So just for example, in this context, now we have ingested data, we have moved to JSON ELF files, and we have created some delta tables on the top of it using DuckDB and polars. Now, what else I can do? I mean, in Fabric, I'm not using Spark. And if I want to use and I want to use in a very Pythonic way, I can use dbt here as well. Of course, the Mehdi showed us that, but here the context is around dbt with Fabric. Now, when the dbt came with Fabric, it wasn't that stable at that particular point of time, but now they have released a very stable version of Fabric. It means, and I'm not using any Spark here, right? I'm not using any Spark here, and what I'm doing here is that I have those, delta tables as a bronze layer. And how do I create this silver and gold layer to be used in my analytics? And here it comes is that if I open this is a very simple program and in Python written, because I have got the dbt code. I'll paste that link where you can find everything there. But the point is, this is a simple Python code which actually you install dbt code, dbt fabric, and it happens all the time, right? So you install dbt code, dbt fabric, and of course this can be integrated with DLT. So DLT and dbt, they integrate well. Okay. On this occasion, I'm not using DLT, but you can use it. Let's say you are building a program and you want to have, what actually Mehdi showed us. And if you want to, after ingesting your data, if you want to call dbt from DLT, it is just completely possible using DLT, which is beautiful, right? And then what I want to do, because how I would be running, so when you want to run dbt with Fabric, you want some credentials under it can actually run your program and it can access your blob stores. Now, there are two ways at the minute, but the best way I've used here is that using service principal in Azure. So, the service principal is a concept where you actually create a service principal, and of course you use and you actually give permission to that service principal to that particular one lake. So dbt, while processing that, can read your data and transform it accordingly. Now, what we are using here is that since we are not hard coding any information here, this data is coming from Azure Key Vault, which is securely storing all the information here. So what I'm doing here is that client ID, tenant ID, and secret, I'm storing it here. First pass, what I'm doing here is that I'm defining my project directory. So if you see, I haven't written any hard-coded values here. And the reason being, they are coming from this. So what I'm saying here is that, so that's my Key Vault name, that's my dbt project, and that's my dbt profile. And if I have to go to this dbt project, let me open that a bit, if I can do that. Yeah, or we can find it here. We have, so what we have done here is we have hosted this, this whole thing here. So it has got this models and then target and seeds and all these things. Now seeds, interesting aspect here, but because I'm using dim date as a seed. So once the dbt program runs, and it is also showing kind of capability that what it can actually do. So in the first pass, it actually runs seed. So it actually fills up all those dim date and dim time. And then in the next page, it just runs those dbt run here. Let me find this source. Kept it somewhere here. Or I can come here. So here is this dbt source. And what I have done here is that you have a dbt project. And when I was talking about credentials, so tenant ID, sorry, my bad. So I was talking about tenant ID, client ID, and client secret. I haven't, I haven't them hard coded anywhere. They are coming from Azure Key Vault, and dbt. I am just configuring what client ID, what etc. that I need to be passing those. and a couple of configuration related. What's my authentication type is service principal, my Fabric Warehouse database, Fabric Warehouse hosting you can find there. And then project specifies how I want to materialize that data. So from a seeding perspective, I'm seeing schema and pool and database dltHub WH. But for silver layer, I'm saying materialization table here. And then for mod, which will be used for analytics purposes, same data warehouse, but schema is gold and schema is silver for silver here. So if I come here now and see everything here, then it means you can run your DBT just within the Fabric environment itself. You deploy using CI/CD pipelines, and once you come here, let me go here then. We have, so if you go to, when you go to your workspace, you will find your lakehouse and warehouses. So this is the LH I have discussed here. And then what you get, I mean, how do you, so you can connect to your lakehouse using SQL endpoint here, right? So it actually gives you a SQL endpoint. And if we observe this, this is a SQL endpoint. It means it can, you can open using Azure Data Studio or Microsoft Studio or anywhere else in Power BI. You can actually build some analytics around using this SQL endpoint. Now using DBT, we have used this WH. It means what we have done here is that if we go inside this DWB warehouse, we actually see a gold schema. So once we run that, we actually see those tables here. Okay, and if we go under silver, then we see tables under that. So the point I was trying to make here is that, of course, within the Fabric environment, if you want to use credentials in a very secure way, then of course you use Azure Key Vault, and it is natively supported within Fabric environment itself. And you use your DBT to transform your data and everything here. So what type of, so that's the project URL I'm going to paste at some point of time. I'm not able to paste it now, but if you see the models, there are simple queries here. I'm just defining all the sources here, city, simple plain query, and then they are being transformed here. So I'm not using any Spark here within Fabric environment. I can use plain Python, and it is very scalable way. Okay, so if you use the pipelines here, they actually support parallelism, etc., and they come with Fabric capacity. So we are not using Spark, though we can use Spark, but we are using Fabric here, which is kind of SQL flavor. So you can use your command, SQL commands, and transform that data, everything using within that Python environment itself. There are other aspects, of course. I mean, what I let's assume that there is a data science team and they are waiting for some data to be sent from Azure to AWS, right? Now, at some point of time, you need to store those S3 credentials somewhere. Of course, you use Azure Key Vault every time to use your S3 AWS access key and secret access key here. So it means once you are running your pipelines, so what I'm doing here is transfer to S3. So I'm actually creating some CSV file here in this process. And what I'm doing here is that securely I'm storing all this information, and I'm actually passing all those information. Now, Porto 3 is how you actually give some commands in AWS. And what I need to use is that folder name, file name, key vault name. And then what it does is that it actually retrieves those credentials from Key Vault in a very secure way. And using Porto, it just transfers this file to S3 bucket, where the guys are waiting to develop a GenAI application that's using AWS Bedrock or something. So we can transmit the CSV file, and then it can transfer those data to Pinecone and all those things, and they can build their GenAI applications then. And that actually allows you to have cross-cloud communications as well. So it means if you're using just Python way within Fabric environment, and you are not relying on any Spark-related things here, okay? Using just plain Python environment, and it's very powerful. The trial version gives you 16 gig memory to have, which is sufficient, to be honest. But if you want to go higher, you can have the different capacities provisioned, and then you can use it. So within the same environment, you can use DuckDB or MotherDuck. You can actually use within the same environment itself, and then you can use cross-cloud communication. So if you want to send it out to AWS, or if you want to send it out to GCP or something or anything else, you can actually do that. Okay, so that's the part I have got here. I think that's what I wanted to showcase here. I think other capability I wanted to show around how do you write a dynamic DuckDB SQL queries, which is if you are developing and if you have been doing a data engineering task, you want to reuse your code. And how do you want to reuse your code is because I actually call this as a SQL catalogs. So SQL catalogs, let me go back to One Lake again. My point was I want to write some DuckDB code, and DuckDB should be accepting those dynamic SQL. And again, at the same time, I don't want to write different other functions for each and every table or each and every query to process it. And how I would like to do that is that I'll have some SQL. So I actually define that SQL catalog, right? So I say I have written some query here, which is saying, this is a customer query. This is a simple SQL query. It is reading file from JSON and passing some parameters. But at the same time, I want to be able to pass some metadata. And metadata is simple. The metadata has got a couple of information. That's why I want to look through where I need to look at, which folder I need to look at, which workspace I need to look at, and what SQL query to execute, right? And now what DuckDB does is that it actually comes here. It actually accepts all this information from the CSV file, and there is a simple function which actually creates all those options, picking up from CSV files. And DuckDB is simply reading and executing those dynamic queries. And this is very powerful. And that's how the pipeline allows you to iterate through reading through CSV files, iterating through each and every row, and then generating and picking up those dynamic SQL queries, creating those dynamic SQL queries, and executing through the DuckDB. So you are not limited to one tool, but different tools within this Fabric ecosystem outside Spark as well, which is pretty powerful if you want to build end-to-end data analytics and other things as well. And now within Fabric environment, data warehouse or lakehouse, Microsoft gives you a serverless SQL endpoint. It can be dedicated at some point of time, but it actually gives you each SQL endpoint for every data warehouse or lakehouse. It means you should be able to connect to that lakehouse or warehouse through Power BI, and then you can create all those visuals. And what I'm doing here is that I have just picked up that SQL endpoint, which I have just showed you a bit earlier, and I'm just loading those data and loading. So Fabric also supports two methods, import and direct query, and I'm using here is a direct query, if you see here. So it means I can see data as it comes to the warehouse, and I don't have to import data because I'm using direct query mode, so I can drive my analytics on the basis of direct query. Now, the other way of not actually, now what actually Mehdi was showing is that you can actually integrate DBT with DuckDB there, and you can move the data to MotherDuck, and you can build the same analytics using MotherDuck endpoint there. And MotherDuck supports Power BI as well, right? So it is pretty useful also. So this actually gives you a little bit of more options. Okay, if you want to build analytics within Fabric, that's completely fine. But if you want, let's say, if you want to analyze your logs and keep your logs in MotherDuck, you have those options available as well. So pick and choose what actually works for you then. Okay, I think that's all for today, guys. That's all I think, Elena, from my side today.
Thank you, Rakesh, so much. And Mehdi, thank you for your presentation. Also, I want to notice that we have certification for this workshop. The link to certification form will be in description. I also share it in comments here. The deadline for the certification is like a month. So today it's May 7th, so June 7th will be a deadline for this work certification. And so you can earn DLT Microsoft Fabric certificate. So thank you very
Cool.
much.
It was nice. See you. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Have a good day, evening.